Found out my wife cheated with her boss 8 months after we married. She lied for 12 years while I built our life. So I quietly put a plan in motion to take back everything she cherished. And she has no idea what's coming. I'm an actuary. My entire career revolves around calculating risk, probability, and the mathematical certainty of outcomes. For 15 years, I've built models that predict human behavior down to decimal points. Turns out, I should have run those calculations on my own marriage. 8 months after our wedding, I was searching for charitable donation receipts on Sierra's laptop for our joint tax filing. She'd left it open while visiting her mother in Phoenix. I needed one specific receipt from a charity auction where we'd met 12 years ago. She'd insisted on claiming it since she'd done all the bidding. That search changed everything. The laptop search function pulled up more than tax documents. It found cached images from a messaging app I didn't recognize. Photos of Sierra with a man I knew as Donovan, a private equity partner she'd introduced as a professional contact who helped her navigate luxury brand acquisitions. The metadata showed dates going back 12 years. The very night we met at that charity auction, she'd sent him photos of herself in the dress I'd complimented, asking if he liked his view from across the room. I didn't throw the laptop. I didn't call her. I didn't even change my expression. I sat in my home office, surrounded by the house I'd paid for, looking at evidence that my entire relationship was built on a lie. Then I did what I do best. I began calculating. The messages revealed everything once I bypassed her amateur encryption. Donovan wasn't just an affair partner, he was essentially her second life. They had pet names. She called him Greenwich after his Connecticut estate, inside jokes about my actuarial work, your number cruncher thinks he's so clever, and an established routine. Every fashion week, Paris, Milan, New York, London, was their playground. Her exhausting buyer trips were romantic getaways funded by my salary and her corporate card. But here's what turned cold analysis into frozen rage. They had a system. Whenever she traveled, she'd send him her hotel details disguised as restaurant recommendations. He'd book the room next door through his company. She'd expense her room to her employer, he'd expense his to his firm. They'd spend the week together while I received carefully timed texts about difficult vendors and delayed shipments. I found 12 years of this. 12 years of me building our life while she built another one parallel to it. I paid off her student loans from FIT while she was sleeping with the man who got her into the program. I spent weekends renovating our house while she spent them at his Greenwich estate. I invested my bonuses in our future while she invested her attention in someone else. The most insulting part? Their messages about me. I wasn't portrayed as a villain or an abuser, I was described as convenient. G is perfect on paper, she wrote. Greenwich, you're perfect everywhere else. He responded, keep your actuary. He's your stability. I'm your excitement. I closed the laptop and opened a spreadsheet. Update 1, the investigation. 2 weeks after discovery, I hired Isla, a former insurance fraud investigator who now runs a private investigation firm. I didn't hire her to follow Sierra around with a camera like some cliché. I hired her to conduct a financial and behavioral audit that would make the IRS proud. Isla's findings were surgical in their precision. Sierra and Donovan had an LLC in Delaware that owned a condo in Miami's design district. The LLC was funded through a complex series of transactions that traced back to inflated purchase orders from Sierra's buying trips. She'd mark up orders by 3 to 5%, routing the excess through shell vendors that Donovan controlled. The money would flow through his private equity firm's consultant payments and eventually land in their LLC. They'd been doing this for 7 years. The condo wasn't just a love nest, it was a tax haven. They'd registered it as an investment property, claiming losses while actually using it as their personal retreat. The furniture inside was all pieces Sierra had damaged in shipping from her employer's inventory, written off as losses but mysteriously restored in their private space. Donovan's situation was equally fascinating. Married to Margot for 18 years, 3 kids in private schools, a reputation as a devoted family man. His firm, Pinnacle Equity Partners, managed $2 billion in assets. He sat on 3 charity boards with his wife. His LinkedIn featured family photos at galas where he praised the importance of trust in all partnerships. The investigation revealed their communication method evolved over time. Early years used encrypted apps. Middle years moved to draft emails in a shared account. Recent years involved coded messages through Venmo payments for lunch and coffee with amounts that corresponded to hotel room numbers. But Isla found something neither of them expected anyone to discover. Donovan was already under preliminary SEC investigation for unrelated trading irregularities. Nothing proven, but enough smoke that fire investigators were sniffing around. His firm didn't know. His wife didn't know. And Sierra definitely didn't know. I added this variable to my spreadsheet and recalculated the timeline. During this phase, I maintained perfect normalcy. I attended her company's autumn mixer, smiled as she introduced me to colleagues, listened to her complain about a difficult vendor in Milan. I even suggested we take a vacation to Miami in December, watching her face microscopically flinch before saying it was too humid that time of year. Every Sunday, she'd make elaborate brunches and post them on Instagram with captions about perfect mornings with my perfect husband. I'd smile, take the photos for her, and add each post to my evidence folder. The metadata from those posts would later prove she was texting Donovan between every staged shot. Update 2, the architecture of destruction. By month 3, I had everything documented. Financial fraud, tax evasion, employment theft, and enough evidence of infidelity to paper a courtroom. But I wasn't interested in a simple divorce. That would be like using a sledgehammer when you have access to controlled demolition. I opened multiple chess games simultaneously. First, I consulted Theodore, a lawyer who specialized in high net worth divorces but approached them like hostile takeovers. We reviewed every document I'd signed in 12 years. Turns out, Sierra had been sloppy. The prenup she'd insisted on to protect her future earnings had a clause about financial misconduct that she'd never actually read. If either party committed financial fraud, they forfeited all marital assets. She'd pushed for this thinking it would protect her from my boring financial world. Instead, she'd signed her own execution warrant. Second, I began legitimate financial separation. I paid off all joint debts using my annual bonus. I stopped contributing to joint investment accounts, citing market volatility. I redirected my 401k contributions to maximum allowable amounts. Everything legal, everything traceable, everything that would look like responsible financial management to any court. Third, I started documenting her patterns. Sierra was meticulous about appearances but sloppy about details. She'd claim business trips but forget to turn off location sharing. She'd use her corporate card for personal expenses then submit edited receipts. She'd tell me she was at supplier meetings while her car's GPS showed she was at Donovan's office. The key was Margot, Donovan's wife. Through careful social media analysis, I learned she ran a successful interior design firm, came from family money, and most importantly, controlled the trust that funded Donovan's initial stake in his private equity firm. She was also quietly fierce. I found a lawsuit from 5 years ago where she'd destroyed a contractor who'd tried to overcharge her. She didn't just win, she got his license revoked. I needed to get information to Margot without appearing to be the source. This required careful orchestration. I created evidence packages. Not emotional rants or grainy photos, but professional presentations that looked like they came from a corporate investigation. Financial flows, timestamp analyses, property records, travel patterns. Everything cross-referenced and verified. Then came the catalyst. Sierra announced she'd been selected for her company's executive leadership program. It came with a significant raise, stock options, and a celebration gala in 4 months where she'd be recognized in front of the entire industry. She bought a $30,000 dress for the occasion, posting about manifesting success and rising to my worth. I congratulated her, took her to dinner at her favorite restaurant, and listened to her talk about how she'd earned this through pure talent. That night, while she slept off the champagne, I finalized my timeline. Everything would converge at that gala. Update 3. The execution. 90 days before the gala, I began the sequence. First, I had Isla anonymously submit a detailed report to the SEC about Donovan's private financial irregularities, specifically focusing on the Delaware LLC and its connection to potential insider trading. The report was thorough enough to demand immediate investigation but complex enough to take weeks to unravel. 2 weeks later, Margot received a package at her design firm. It contained everything about the affair, formatted like a client portfolio. No accusations, no emotional appeals, just facts. Property records showing the Miami condo purchase. Credit card records showing matching charges at hotels. Flight manifests showing Donovan's trips coinciding with fashion weeks. The package included a note, "You deserve a complete view before making any design decisions." Margot didn't confront Donovan immediately. Instead, she hired her own forensic accountant and started moving assets. I know this because she did exactly what I calculated she would. She started liquidating joint holdings and transferring them to accounts Donovan couldn't access. She also began documenting everything herself, adding to the evidence I'd provided. Week 6, I submitted an anonymous tip to Sierra's employer's ethics hotline about inventory irregularities. The tip included enough specifics to trigger an internal audit but not enough to immediately implicate Sierra. The audit would take time, approximately 8 weeks by my calculation, concluding just before the gala. Week 8, the SEC investigation into Donovan became serious enough that his firm initiated their own internal review. He was quietly placed on administrative leave pending review. He couldn't tell Sierra because it would reveal the extent of their financial entanglement. Week 10, Sierra's company audit discovered the inflated purchase orders. They started tracing the shell vendors. She didn't know yet, but her digital footprint was being examined by corporate security. During all of this, I played the perfect husband. I helped her pick jewelry for the gala. I listened to her practice her acceptance speech. I even suggested we invite her parents to witness her big moment. She said no, let's keep it intimate, just us. 3 days before the gala, Margot filed for divorce and froze all of Donovan's accessible assets. She'd found additional affairs and financial improprieties I hadn't even discovered. Donovan was served at his office, escorted out by security, and found his corporate cards deactivated. 2 days before the gala, Sierra's company completed their audit. The CFO personally reviewed the findings. They decided to handle it quietly to avoid scandal but insisted on immediate action. The day of the gala, Sierra spent 8 hours at the spa. Hair, nails, makeup, massage. She posted constantly about living her dream and proving that hard work pays off. She didn't notice that Donovan hadn't responded to her messages in 3 days. That evening, she put on the $30,000 dress. I told her she looked stunning, and I meant it. She did look stunning. Like a beautiful building right before demolition. We arrived at the gala in the Bentley she'd insisted we leased to match her new status. She walked the red carpet, gave interviews to trade publications, networked with industry leaders. She was radiant with anticipation. An hour into the event, during cocktails, she was approached by her CEO, the CFO, and 2 security officers. They asked her to step into a private room. She looked at me, confused. I squeezed her hand supportively and said I'd wait right there. 20 minutes later, she was escorted out through the service entrance. Her company had given her 2 options: resign immediately and forego all benefits, or be publicly terminated and prosecuted. She chose resignation. She texted me frantically from the parking garage. I didn't respond immediately. I was inside, explaining to concerned colleagues that she'd had a family emergency. I finally met her at the car, where she was crying in her $30,000 dress, her career destroyed, her phone buzzing with messages from Donovan's wife's lawyer. The ride home was silent except for her trying to call Donovan. His phone was disconnected. Update 4, The Reckoning. That night, Sierra tried to explain. Not apologize, explain. She said I couldn't understand the pressure of her industry, how Donovan had been there first, how their relationship was complicated. She actually used the word complicated to describe 12 years of deception. I let her talk. Then I handed her a folder. Inside were the divorce papers, already filed. The prenup's fraud clause was highlighted. Documentation of her financial crimes was attached. Records showing I'd already separated our finances legally over the previous months. A forensic accounting of every dollar I'd spent on her education, our home, our life, totaling $1.3 million over 12 years. She went from explanation to rage. How dare I invade her privacy? How dare I ruin her career? How dare I involve Donovan? I didn't raise my voice. I simply pointed out that she'd ruined her own career through embezzlement. I just reported it. Donovan ruined his own marriage through fraud. I just documented it. She'd invaded the privacy of our marriage 12 years ago. I just balanced the equation. The next morning, she discovered the full extent of her situation. Her bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. Her corporate cards were cancelled. Her leased Bentley was being repossessed since it was in her name only. The condo in Miami was being seized by the SEC. Donovan's assets were frozen between the SEC investigation and his divorce. She couldn't even afford a decent lawyer. Meanwhile, I'd been systematically preparing. My finances were clean, separated, and protected. The house was mine, purchased before marriage and never refinanced jointly. My retirement accounts were untouchable. My reputation was intact. I was the sympathetic husband who discovered his wife's crimes and properly reported them. Sierra moved in with her mother in Phoenix. Within a week, the fashion industry knew everything. Her Instagram went from 50,000 followers to 8,000. The brands she'd worked with distanced themselves. The vendors she'd cultivated relationships with blocked her calls. The industry that had been her life became her prison. Everyone knew what she'd done. Donovan lost everything to Margot in the divorce. The SEC investigation led to criminal charges. His firm expelled him completely, clawing back 15 years of carried interest. He went from managing billions to filing for bankruptcy. The divorce was finalized in 3 months, uncontested due to the fraud clause. Sierra received nothing except the personal items she'd brought into the marriage. She actually had to pay me restitution for the marital assets she'd wasted on her affair. But I wasn't done. Final update, the partnership. 6 months after the gala, I received a call from Margot. She wanted to meet for coffee. We sat in a quiet cafe in Stamford, two people who'd been played for fools by partners who thought they were too clever to be caught. She was direct. How long did you really know? I told her the truth. 8 months of knowing, 3 months of planning, 3 months of execution. She smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her. I knew for 3 years. My calculated composure cracked slightly. 3 years? She explained that she'd discovered Donovan's first affair 5 years ago. Not with Sierra, with another woman. She'd prepared to divorce him then, but her lawyer discovered that Donovan had been slowly siphoning money from her family trust through complex trades. If she'd divorced him then, she'd have lost millions. So she waited. She documented everything. She built her own business to be independent. She let him think he was clever while she positioned herself for the kill. When my package arrived, it wasn't a revelation, it was an opportunity. You gave me the catalyst I needed, she said. The SEC investigation meant he couldn't hide assets anymore. Your evidence about Sierra gave me moral superiority in court. The timing was mathematical perfection. She pulled out a folder. Inside was everything, not just about Donovan and Sierra, but about 6 other affairs Donovan had over the years. Each meticulously documented. Each with financial improprieties attached. Each one a nail in his coffin that she'd been saving. But here's what you don't know, she continued. Sierra wasn't his only current affair. He had 2 others. A pharmaceutical rep in Boston. A hedge fund analyst in Singapore. Your wife thought she was special. She was Tuesday and Thursday. The final insult to Sierra's ego, she wasn't even exclusive in her affair. Margot and I didn't become friends. We became something more valuable, allies who understood that revenge isn't a dish best served cold, it's an equation best balanced with patience. She used the information I'd gathered to squeeze an additional $30 million from Donovan's hidden assets. I used her network to rebuild my social life, gaining clients and connections that doubled my income within a year. Last week, I heard through industry contacts that Sierra was working as a junior buyer for a discount chain in Phoenix, making 1/3 of her previous salary. She'd tried to restart with Donovan after both divorces, only to discover he'd fled to Switzerland to avoid prosecution, leaving her with nothing but memories of hotel rooms she could no longer afford. Donovan eventually pled guilty to securities fraud. He got 18 months in minimum security and lifetime ban from financial services. His Greenwich estate was sold to cover legal fees. His children won't speak to him. His reputation is radioactive. The mathematics of revenge are simple. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. They spent 12 years building their lie. I spent 6 months calculating its demolition. They thought they were playing checkers while I was playing chess. Turns out, we were playing different games entirely. I was playing nuclear physics. The explosion was beautiful. Edit, since several people have asked, yes, this is legal. Everything I did was either reporting actual crimes or sharing truthful information. I never hacked anything, cached files on a shared laptop aren't hacking, never threatened anyone, never broke any laws. I just applied actuarial science to personal revenge. And no, I don't feel guilty. They had 12 years to feel guilty. They chose not to. I chose mathematics instead. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you really like our videos, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.